Hey, everybody. Welcome to this special show that we're doing today. First thing I'm going to do is bring on my partner in crime, Chris. How you doing, Chris?
Hey, buddy, how you doing?
I'm doing good. This is a very interesting topic that we're touching on today because it's time. We got to start thinking about this. When are we going to reopen?
Yeah, we it 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 looks like it's going to happen faster than you might think, but there's still a lot of steps we got to do to get there, right? So,
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly. So, oh, there's Nathaniel saying, "Hi, Chris."
hey, buddy.
So we got some friends together, and I'm going to start bringing them on. First is Jay from Deep River Geek Fest. How you doing, Jay?
Amazing. Thank you very much for doing this. This is great.
Thanks for taking part. Then we have Kevin from my other favorite convention, ThunderCon. How you doing?
Great. Thanks for the shout out and for having me on the show.
Oh, dude, I'm glad you're here. We also have Neil from Sudbury Graphicon. Neil, how's it going?
It's going great so far.
So far, that's the
So
key
far.
word. Yeah, exactly. And I was glad he did make it. Here's Emmanuel from Forest City Comic Con. How you doing?
Not too bad. Just made it home.
Yes, timing is everything. So, guys, we kind of got together, and this started because CKX was looking at doing a show October 23rd. And then I think it was 3 or 4 days ago, Fan Expo dropped that they're doing a physical show on the 22nd to the 24th. And they got a huge amount of backlash about it. So it kind of got me thinking, like, when should we think about this? Like, is October too early? Does anyone have any thoughts?
I think we all probably have some personal thoughts on that. Obviously, there's more than just individuals that we have to think about, and safety is priority for us and our board for sure. And I'm not sure we're ready for October.
See, one of the things, and Chris and I were talking about this earlier, is regionality. Because where we are in Chatham, it's kind of calm. But then you get to Toronto, and it's not as calm there as far as COVID goes. So does regionality play a part in this?
I I think regionality will play a big role in this. I think just our particular market is going to play a big role in this. I mean, I understand what Fan Expo is trying to do. They're trying to keep the hype alive. They're trying to get people excited, give us something to look forward to. But at the same point in time, is it smart and is it necessarily a safe option to do?
That's the big question.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Jay, let me just ask you, if you could plan a show, you had any date open, you didn't have to worry about anything, when would you start physically planning for?
I would have liked to have done one in 2021, but right now, like mentally and seeing everything, we're not looking at starting until 2022.
Yeah.
But I mean, personally, I would have loved to have done one in 2021. But then I had a couple of vendors who asked, well, if you're supplying a table, are you going to supply me with the plexiglass to cover me, for my safety wise? And if I have 50 tables at $50, 50 plexiglasses, that's a lot of money coming out of our pocket to make sure they're safe.
That brings up a great point. Now, is future safety concerns too? Is that going to increase the cons, like the back end on the con? And yeah, I could see that. Emmanuel, you guys have a late show, like you guys usually are in September, October. What are your thoughts for this year?
So for Forest City Comic Con, even us who position ourselves later in the year for around when students come back and all that, it didn't feel right. It didn't feel like a good time because the environment untested. We don't know how things are going to be. We don't know how far lockdowns can be. We don't know if there's other waves, new variants and all that. And that level of uncertainty is something a small show always gives you fear, right? You don't want to be the first one in the pool and find out, the pool wasn't treated last night.
That's a very good analogy, actually. That is.
Well, because if you go into a pool and it's not safe, everyone who went into the pool first is going to get sick first. So, and that being said, like this hasn't affected me personally so much because I organized a lot of other shows online for work. But I also travel as a storyteller for role-playing games and such. And I know other shows that are positioned to go in person in the States that I would normally be at that are going this fall, which leaves me sort of, wow, I can't believe, good on you. But here where we're behind on vaccinations, kind of scary.
Yeah. Chris and I did talk about that. I do a show with a wrestler down in the States, and right now he just did his first real live show last weekend in Baltimore. So,
wow.
Yeah, the States are opening up, but then you look at it, are they jumping the gun? Are they going too fast?
Americans tend to they like being number one, and in this case, I'm okay with them being number one.
They're the first ones in the pool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It will give us, though, a good tester. All those shows, I'm sure we all have some mentality of who's going to go first. And I don't want to say it's like a game of chicken, but it's more of, will it work? Do we have the data that it will work? And now we are watching another place that is slightly ahead of our schedule, and they're going to be able to go do it. So we're going to be able to see live feedback of, is this going to blow up in everyone's faces? So,
No, absolutely.
but they have good policies. Everyone must be vaccinated. Masks are still a thing if you want it to be. Like, they still have good security issues, which are being evolved as, experts advise them. So.
Oh, and that's good too. Yeah, like you said, you got to follow the safety guidelines because I know they're going to be in place for quite some time. Neil, we had spoken about the vaccination. You said you gathered some information. How fast have we started to do this in Canada?
Believe it or not, Canada's actually not that far behind. I know it's getting a lot of flack in the media, but in the grand scheme of things, if you're looking at Ontario alone right now, at our current rate, assuming no hiccups in supply and demand, no new variants of concern that we have to worry about, we should hit about 90% of Canadians in general with at least one dose by maybe late June or July. Now, having said that, Ontario alone is sitting somewhere around 52%. This is as of the data that I downloaded, and I kind of compiled the numbers from the province about an hour ago. So we're at 52% for a single dose, but we're only sitting around 4% fully vaccinated.
Now, I don't know if you might know this or not. What effect does it have for one dose as opposed to two?
One dose, the initial data that was coming out put you somewhere around 75%-ish immunity, depending on which vaccine you got. So that's Pfizer and Moderna primarily. AstraZeneca was a little less efficient, maybe somewhere around 50 or 60%. And don't quote me on that. I'm just kind of pulling it out from memory. But that's with a single dose. The second dose, in theory, about 3 weeks after you receive it, you should be sitting somewhere around 95% immune to the virus. So it does mean that you could technically still get it, but your symptoms won't be anywhere near as severe. And if you do get it, the chances of you passing it on are also reduced. So that's the good news about it. It doesn't mean that everybody is going to be perfectly protected once you have the vaccine. And that there's a difference between my role as a registered nurse who's a science geek and has been reading about this for a year and a half versus the president of a convention who has to think about getting thousands of people inside a tiny space. And I know that despite the fact that the rules will say maintain 2 meters distance, there is no way that I'm going to be able to enforce that.
That is one of the other things I wanted to touch on. How do you set things up to be able to keep people that far apart?
Well, and like you mentioned, right? I mean, there's going to be questions as to whether or not we're going to provide dividers. We're going to provide hand sanitizer, the cleaning staff on the floor to make sure that everything is safe. We're going to have extra security. So on the back end, that is a huge expense for conventions. And I really do not understand how Fan Expo can fit, in theory, 25,000 people inside a convention center and maintain safety.
With 25,000, wouldn't that be their target over the weekend?
I would hope so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Versus in a single day. But you also got to take into account the fact that we've been locked up for the better part of a year, so people are going to be very exciting. And unless they're booking specific time slots, how are you going to regulate the flow of traffic?
Good point. Emmanuel.
Question that I've been getting from people because of the other events is how much of the responsibility is on the event, because we are people who rent venues, and how much does the venue have to provide? And that's a common question, and I have no information. I'm not sure if you guys have heard anything, because I'm hearing some people like venues should also be upping their game, because they're usually the ones who are helping provide the people who change the garbage, do the cleaning of the restrooms, all those high contact areas. How much does the venue have to step up on top of the organizer who's renting a venue has to step up and provide their own? Because of course we want to protect ourselves and the community we invited. Have you guys heard anything? Because this is a common question I get.
I actually work in insurance in my day job, so unfortunately there is no good answer to that. Both the carriers that are covering the event locations and those vendors that are renting space are worried about providing policies in the first place for those types of purposes. And of course, for event coverage for the con itself, that's totally up in the air. We really have no idea what's going on. Ultimately, I think it'll end up just following, at least for the event side, like for the con side, it'll probably be focused a lot on proving that you have met the restriction guidelines from the Ontario Ministry in my case and most of your cases. So, but I don't think there's going to be any direct pressure on the actual venues themselves unless we put that in the contract. So it's something we got to be watching for.
That's a very good point. I know I've spoken to our venue, and they have stated that the shows that they've done and that they plan to do, they have hand sanitizer in the lobby. And that seems to be about where their, line is. Everything in the hall is up to us in this case, but they're taking care of hand sanitizer and things like that for people coming in.
Yeah, essentially the token gesture of "see, we tried."
Yeah. Exactly. So that sorry, brain was not thinking as fast as my mouth. When you're going to be planning your next show, because I know we had hopes of having an April show because this was back in October of last year, and we redesigned the layout to provide some sort of streamlining and things like that. Have you guys looked at reorganizing your shows because of this?
Not so much the show yet, because again, we're waiting more for when is the right time to do it. And I'm not convinced. Normally we do it end of September, and I'm not convinced it's going to be safe for this year. But we haven't made that call yet. We're waiting to see a little bit. But when it comes to making adjustments, one thing that ThunderCon has tried to do is involve itself in other community events. Like we just ended up finishing up a virtual marathon that we were putting on in conjunction with the Canadian Mental Health Association and the Children's Center Foundation for Mental Health Services. In last fall, we did a Wear Your Mask PSA in conjunction with the local EMS and paramedics in Thunder Bay. So, we're trying to do good for the community to keep the name up and recognition up and keep people engaged. But we're not sure what we're going to do next, whether that's more like a smaller market focus style event as opposed to a full convention, because it'll be easier to manage traffic flow and vendors and things like that.
Well, you guys are in a unique situation too. Like, I love your new layout because you have basically a parking lot in the middle and you have outbuildings. So it helps you regulate it a little more.
Yeah, I think the Canadian Lakehead Exhibition Grounds is what you're referring to. It's where the exhibition comes through town every year, and we have the only movie theater in town is Silver City right there. So we do have that advantage of outdoors, but right now it's actually where the COVID clinics are. So we don't know when they're going to be done with the space and we'd be able to do anything anyway, right?
Same with us.
Yeah.
Brittany just mentioned, I'm not convinced any con would be a great idea this year, no matter how badly we all want to get back to the events we love. And see, and that's the other thing you've got to look at too. You will have people that are so tired of being inside their basements, they'll go to anything. But you're going to have a vast majority, like Brittany, like myself, honestly, gun shy to like using Emmanuel, being that first person in the pool. Who wants to do that?
Very popular conversation topic came up in one of my RPG groups, in a Facebook group, where we shared a memory from 3 years ago of a big D&D event. And everyone is like, the tables are right beside, the chairs are beside each other. Everyone's standing, walking. You have to like bump against each other to go through. No one's wearing masks. And we share this video and everyone's like, oh, look at that. It's so nice. And then immediately everyone commenting, this makes me feel weird. Why does this feel reckless? Why does this feel unsafe? Like, we have now shifted the psychology and human behavior elements, right? Where, yes, you said, some people are going to be like, oh my God, let me go outside, anything, do something. But other people are now, like, we have been so long without a crowd that it's no longer feels like we've been warned for what, 1 year, 2 years almost now. Don't do it. Don't be people, right? So everyone's very gun shy, and that's from the communities who are like, my favorite hobby is gathering in crowds. So I don't know about you guys, but I'm not sure if you've heard from your community that sort of feedback of, we want to do something, but at the same time, people scare me.
Oh no, that's exactly the feedback I've been hearing, and that's kind of why I wasn't surprised when I saw the feedback Fan Expo got, but I kind of was, just because of the people that are chomping at the bit.
Yeah.
One of our comedians, Lance. Oh, so sorry. Go ahead.
Well, the other thing is, for example, the guests. How far out will a guest come to your show? Like, for our show, we had Mitch Markowitz, and will he come 7 hours down to our small event? Or we have Rob Sichetto from Sudbury. Will he want to travel 3 hours to come to our show now?
Yeah.
And
will they have to isolate 2 weeks on either end if they do it?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a very active conversation. One of our main guests for what would have been 2020 is still with us. We haven't announced them. We had the airfare arranged and everything, right? Because it's scheduled for this person was from far in advance, and they're still hanging on, and they're still waiting, and they're still playing ball, and everything's great. But we're talking about international travels and stuff like that. It's a nightmare of like, what's the policy, right? Because for us, we can't even go to the States easily right now, let alone bringing in somebody who knows where he'll be or they'll be at that time, right? So,
Well, we had a very similar circumstance. We actually, thankfully, were able to recover our deposit from the guests that we had booked since January 2020. So we were really hurting for cash flow, and we had to figure out ways to get us out of that debt pile before we could even really think about the next event, right?
No, exactly.
I'm sure every small event, regardless being a con or something else, had to go through that sort of pinch. Just think of all the small businesses and how they're trying to survive this last year and a half, right?
Yeah.
So,
Which is exactly why we're trying to find different ways, and like the market idea that to focus on the vendors that have already confirmed for the last event that we never got to put out, right? Some way that we can help them get through it with us. That's our focus.
yeah.
We're in the same boat with Emmanuel, because we have two of our guests. We've announced them. It's Lori Wilcox and Sid Vicious, and both of those are stateside. So when speaking with Lori, she's still on board to come. If we have it in October, if we have it in April, she doesn't care. But with their restrictions lifting faster than ours, is that kind of travel going to be allowed? And like Neil said, is there going to be quarantine on either end? Is Ontario going to force that if they're coming internationally? You know, there's a lot of questions in the air. I'll get to Lance. Lance is one of our board members here. He said step 3 for Ontario, as far as COVID goes, from the Ontario government's page, step 3, 70 to 80% of adults with 1 dose, 25% fully vaccinated, permit with restrictions, expand indoor where face coverings can't always be worn, larger indoor and outdoor gatherings, indoor dining, essential and non-essential, retail open with limited capacity, large indoor religious services, rites and ceremony gatherings, indoor marketing. So that sounds like us. But it still might be restricted to like 100 people or less. And that's the big thing.
So when you actually dig into the plan for the reopening, even in step 3, it's assuming there's no spikes, assuming numbers are going down, and maintaining 2 meters physical spacing between everybody. Now, what a lot of people kind of forget is that 2 meter physical distance was assuming sterile environment, no moving air, and you're just kind of existing next to each other for no more than 15 minutes and then going on your separate way. But if you've got people moving around, air currents, that space actually kind of jumps up to 3 meters, 4 meters, so on and so forth, right?
Well,
Considering it's so hard to get 2 meters at a grocery store, which is designed for large alleyways, lots of space and so forth, right? With moving air flows and so forth. Speaking as a logistics guy, I do the map making for the con, how many tables, all that stuff, right? Our venues are not designed in the same way usually. So
yeah, in fact, it's almost kind of the opposite, because the more we can generate a crowd, the more excitement we can often generate inside a convention.
Exactly.
Because if you've got a lineup of people, then obviously whatever that is worth checking out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know we redesigned our layout based on, COVID, so that it was more of a maze and you had to go from A to B and then out of the building. But the biggest fault I kept finding was we're in an environment where everybody touches everything, and there's no way to get around that. Like, I don't see a con where nobody touches anything. They just do, like Neil said, they just stand in their line and they walk through and look at things and then leave.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's going to want to look at the art, hold the collectible, see something. Oh, that's knitted. What does it look like when I pick it up? Is it stitched properly in the back? Stuff like that. Yeah.
Well, the biggest thing,
and they're going to want to stop and take pictures with their friends and do whatever. Yeah, I mean, how do you keep them flowing?
Yep, exactly. The biggest thing I'm thinking of, and it's the basis for a Comic-Con, is the comic book. You get in front of a box and you start flipping through, looking. That's the appeal of it. But you're also manhandling all these books. Everybody else is manhandled.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So for Sudbury, I'm on the board of directors. I'm involved more in the organizing of it. But for CKX ThunderCon, right? I'm part of the Klingon Assault Group. We're there, and the reason why we're there is because we're constantly interacting with the crowd. People like to spar with us, kind of stand off face to face with us. So, it'd be really kind of weird, because my group of cosplay friends, they instantly look at me and say, okay, what's the science on this? How can we do this safely? But it's not going to be the same thing if you're standing off in front of a Klingon. They're like, hey, maintain at least 2 meters away.
You got to be 1 bat lift distance away.
Yeah. Oh, it's a minimum of 2 bat lift distance, right?
Oh, 2.
We might be able to just kind of clip off the tip of each other's bat lift, right?
We also deal with a community and a demographic. Like you just said, cosplay, right? Cosplay, wonderful, love it. Could you imagine if all these policies are meant for easy breathing, access going around cosplay? You're hot, you're sweaty, you're in layers and so forth, right? You're going to get more people in the air, right? More of that breath and so forth. Cosplay also, thankfully gives some distance and the big ones. But yeah, you've got people like Comic-Cons usually have a lot of activities that engage you, and thus, you're going to, you can't be that close, breathing heavily. So.
Yeah, and I already do a lot of first aid at conventions, so
That brings up the point of, so do you allow homemade cloth masks at the event, or you have to require medical grade because then all that sweating and moisture isn't getting caught, right?
Which kind of then comes back to your day job, Kevin. What's my insurance company going to tell me?
Yep.
Do I have to have $5 or $10 million coverage instead of my usual $2 million? Do I have to have special rules in place? Do I have to have maybe the public health unit there to make sure that we're following certain rules? Do I have to pay for extra inspections? And then, do I have to buy medical grade mask? And are they going to be available? Level 1 or level 3? Which ones?
Yeah.
Right back to who supplies them. Does the con supply them or does the venue supply them?
Yeah. Do I have to go through my local hospital that's already strapped for PPE to make sure that I can get a shipment?
No. Lance said here, sitting at an RPG table 3 feet from across the table or less and shoulder to shoulder, side by side. Yeah, that's normally how it looks.
Yeah.
Do you think that this will affect the cons in the future period, or is it just a period? Like, okay, that was weirdly stated.
Do you think it's a phase or long term is what you mean?
There we go. Thank
But the
you.
question is, how long is the phase? We don't know how long this will stay in the human psyche.
I think there'll be some permanent changes to how we organize cons for sure, and that's a good thing because like over the next 5-10 years, they're going to be safer because we're going to be thinking about these things. In the short term, it's going to be a drastic change, but I don't see us ever getting back to where we were.
I think one huge advantage all of this is going to give us is the one thing everyone has said recently is, flu season was a lot nicer to us. Can you imagine if we put on all these policies because of what we've learned over the last year and a half, and then suddenly con plague, con crud, like that icky feeling you get after being around so many people and getting ill somehow, you didn't sleep or something. Imagine just suddenly you go to cons, you go back, and there's no recovery period and everything's great. That sounds delightful, I have to admit.
I have to agree.
I can't argue that logic. No, that is true. That is very, very true.
And only a small concern for like con goers who understand. Like people, maybe not all understand, but those who go to a lot of cons, you know what I mean. The one con a year that you're just like, oh man, I'm dying.
Yeah.
My first ever convention, I was taken out for a week afterwards with some kind of a flu. It was impressive.
Yeah. Con sickness. Yes.
Yeah, the con flu.
So.
Sorry.
Go ahead,
I know
Neil.
like for Sudbury's end, as much as I'd like to be able to host something in 2021, I don't think necessarily that's going to be a thing, unless I do smaller segments that are kind of targeting our niche markets, like maybe towards September, October, depending on what the rates are in Sudbury and the vaccine rates in Sudbury. I might be able to do like an art night, but for a maximum of 20 people, assuming PPE is worn and so on and so forth. So that's kind of how I think we're going to be shifting things for the rest of this year, moving into next.
That makes sense. Lance even says it seems that unless 90% vaccination is achieved by the end of the summer, an autumn seems unlikely, and it's not something you can line up guests and vendors on, etc.
It's that second shot
Yeah.
that once you get, like the state says 40% of people with both shots. So like you say, getting that 20% most vulnerable with the second shot is really just as important as the first shot for everybody else, right? So,
and I think part of what a lot of people are forgetting is that 10 or 20%, that's going to be our most vulnerable. That's going to be people in long-term care facilities, in hospitals. It's not going to be our target market. Right. I mean, don't get me wrong. If Grandma wants to go to Sudbury Graphicon, Grandma is more than welcome. But she's probably not coming.
Yeah, it's not the target logistic. I hear that. So, do you guys foresee any changes you can think of like right now that a con should make in planning for 2022?
I think for us anyway, the biggest thing we're doing during this downtime is, aside from reimagining how we're going to do things in a live environment, we're trying to do all that unfun policy and procedure stuff so that, those people that have been involved with it at the core, when they leave, that people can pick up the torch and continue on without having to relearn everything. And that's what we're trying to do over the next year. That's our biggest focus for sure. So volunteering and training those volunteers that are going to represent you at the next live event, health and safety's got to be a big part of that training, and that is going to be a big undertaking for sure.
No, that's true.
We
Because
were talking about developing the policy there. I love my convention. It's been around now for 5 years, but we just transitioned from being a pet project of the Greater Sudbury Public Libraries to officially standing up as our own as a not-for-profit organization in April of last year. So we had one convention as a not-for-profit. I got voted in as president, and then I had to shut down the con.
I feel your pain. This is my first year as the chair too.
As my first vacation.
Yeah, so it was poor timing, but it was also a little bit of a blessing in disguise because I had 4 brand new board members who had no experience in running the convention, all very talented professionals from the community. But when it comes to actual policies for how to run a convention, safety issues that kind of creep up, we didn't have that before. So it looks like we've been really kind of quiet on social media in Sudbury, but what we've been doing is a lot of that back end work and research to make sure that our next board of directors doesn't have to recreate everything from the ground up again.
no,
Yeah.
great idea. Lance here mentioned, he goes, unfun stuff, Rob, and duplicate it from the big cons like Toronto, New York City, Calgary, and of course San Diego. You know the big cons are going to have safety measures out the yin yang. So would it be good to follow their lead?
I think in general, yes. But every one of us, especially in a smaller con environment, is going to have some very unique things that we have to deal with that probably don't apply to San Diego Comic-Con, right? We don't have big studios sending us their actors to pitch the next MCU movie, right? We don't have any of that, so I don't know if we're going to have the same types of procedures, but it's important to have ones that work for you.
But on the flip side, right, as smaller shows than these big titles, we also won't have huge teams to divvy up the work, the responsibility, the learning. We don't have the big teams, the big budgets, where you can just hire this health company to worry about it completely and provide us with, 100 staff from their roster, right? I'm sure all of us are working with, a much smaller team to do everything that these big shows are doing with all their committees and groups. So it's a lot more difficult on this side.
I think what's also going to play a role in that is what grants are still available in that aspect. So I know that my con doesn't have the budget right now to go out and buy extra PPE, but if there's a program in place from the Ontario government or from the federal government, then we can probably go out and afford to buy $20,000 worth of hand sanitizer, masks, and so on and so forth, so that we can run the convention from there. So it's really going to come down to a big role as to how many of my sponsors have made it through the pandemic and what kind of subsidies and grants are available on the back end.
Unfortunately, and I hate to say this, but I think we're going to probably take a little bit of a backseat when those grants come to the live music venues and those that have been really, really decimated as well, right? I think they're going to get a lot of focus, and unless we partner with live music acts and do things like that, then we might not see some of that right away.
No, that's a valid point too. So I'm gathering from the general consensus, it does not look like anybody is planning a show in 2021.
Correct.
It certainly sounds like it.
It sounds like
So, sounds like none of us wanted to admit it, but yeah.
Yeah.
We
Well,
haven't-
it's a valid,
we haven't had that
very
though.
direct question we should ask.
Well, I know we had tentatively, like I said, the 23rd. And after the backlash, I got a little concerned. But now sitting here talking with you guys, there is a lot that goes into this thought process about, and I'm going to go back to Emmanuel, being that first person in the pool, how they set it up, what they do, and then the fallout thereafter. So
I think the first indication to me that things were going to be radically different was when I had to start considering when everyone was doing plexiglass-based like safety, right? Okay, so plexiglass needs to be held up by something. Okay, so I need lumber of so many inches to hold it, to hang it to something, some piping, right? And then, wait a second, okay, now I gotta put 3 inches extra in between each table, which now suddenly means I've got so many feet in a long row that are gone, which now means I've lost a table probably in every row. If I've lost so many tables, multiply by those rows, how many tables am I going down? Suddenly, the less vendor tables, does that affect the vendor price because of the requirements? I'm like you can see, just 3 inches cascaded into a lot to think about.
Mm-hmm.
no,
And I could barely
absolutely.
hear you at a convention before, much less now shouting through glass.
Yeah.
That's true too. Now I know that one of the things that I liked about smaller cons, like ThunderCon, like Fort City, and all that, is you didn't have that shoulder to shoulder like you were fighting through a crowd. Is with Fan Expo, that was the experience, and I don't know. I don't see that happening anytime soon.
No, and not sure I want to see that happening.
Yeah, there is that.
No.
I want to keep as much space as possible, and you're right. We're lucky that the CLE, our venue, is partly outdoors, so we certainly can adjust to take advantage of that. But then we're at the mercy of the weather too, right?
That's the biggest thing. I know last year, Chris and I tossed around the idea of an outdoor event of some kind. But you're right, 100% right. You are at the mercy of the weather. If you plan and sell and everybody's geared up for the 25th of May and it pours, well, you're screwed.
Yeah, I mean, we're not called Thunder Bay for no reason at all. It's pretty good odds that it'll be precipitation whenever we plan something.
That's how
And
it
the
works.
winds coming off of Superior are never known to be strong.
I do have a funny story. I'm not sure if you guys ever have come across this when you talk to your layouts and you talk about flows, but when I started working on Forest City Comic Con, I went back to college and I took event planning as supplementary information to, get back into it all. And one of the classes, they taught us this big formula for how to design appropriate flow of people, comfortable spacing for weddings, events, trade shows, and all that. And I will never not remember this class because the end equation is every person requires a 5-foot square of space on your layout on many shows to be comfortable. And the nerd that I am, looking to my school bag, and I've got all my D&D books, and I'm like, no, it can't be that easy. It can't be that, right? And I share it with the class, and it really, has stuck with all these years that when you want design flow, you want about 5-foot squares per person if they're stationary, right? Now, we're moving flow event, but with all this extra, safety and all that, right? Each person needs more space, and you've got to factor in a whole new equation than you would do with shows all these years previously, right? So I'm not sure how you guys analyze what comfortable space is, but I know it's very convenient when you can just pull up a big D&D grid map and start moving your tables around. So
Who said D&D wouldn't come in handy,
who said that? Yeah.
right? You've just
I
made us
haven't even attempted to do that yet, to be honest with you.
Well, guys, thank you so much for coming on to chat about this. What I'd like, if you don't mind, just to see what it's like. In about 3 months, I'd love to hop back on and chat more and see where we stand at that point.
I would definitely be up for it. There's just on the back end planning and procedure and policy, there's probably lots of things that this group can discuss in the future for sure.
Well, it's gonna be interesting too to see where we are medically at that point, because I think that's the thing that's driving us crazy is it's the unknown. You know, is it going to be a month? Is it going to be 3 months? Is it going to be another year? Because I know when we were first looking at PKX, you know, okay, April's canceled. Let's shoot for October. We were looking at a couple months of being down, and we're now a year and a half. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in about 3 months.
Yeah.
I will say I'm fairly optimistic that next year we should be able to do some fairly large events. Yeah.
Normally. Yeah.
Well,
Not
that's
normal,
being, that's
but-
being so small.
Yeah.
What's that?
With us being so small, I've always believed in kind of a community helping each other. So, I mean, the whole thought of cross promoting, helping, you know, like having little contests between cons, I think as smaller cons, it help each other, right?
Oh, absolutely.
I'm all for that. Yeah.
I know. We do that on our webpage. We have one that shows the con dates for other conventions, but
Nice.
well, it's empty right now. But normally, we like to help push because the community is the community, whether it's at PKX, ThunderCon, Sudbury, you know, Forest City, or Deep River. It's the community. You're 100% right, Jay.
One of my personal favorite experiences that I gained from organizing Forest City Comic Con has been, I do as you guys, some of you guys know, I travel to other shows with the Forest City Comic Con booth, promote and stuff like that. But doing these cross promos and going around, you get to know the organizers. And then it got to the point where the organizers, if they got into a pinch, they're like, well, steal Manny from his booth, right? Get a hand. Like I remember one year I was at Con Bravo, and there was a new organizing team. They were just changing over, and there was a problem, security concern, and I have a security background as well. So they're like, "Get Manny, get in here," you know. And it was suddenly like every organizer who had cross promo booth was in one big meeting. Like, what do we do in this situation? And you can suddenly like just double your team if you've got the right friends at your show who are just there for some other reason, and that has been some of my favorite experiences. I think the weirdest might be going to another show and then helping them with their numbers. Like I was helping them like with their budget spreadsheet to confirm some numbers, right? So
It helps so much. We did that with ThunderCon. I was originally supposed to go just to manage Paul McGillian, but talking with the group, and I'd already been there the year before, we ended up putting together this whole theater presentation with Matt, and it was amazing. But that's the beauty of being a part of a community, not just CKX, but a community.
Well, even leading into 2020, I had Rob and Heather Dixon from ThunderCon in a private chat, and we were all sitting around talking, being like, "What's going on? Is there any chance of this ever happening this year?" And we kind of were talking around on the back end, being like, "Okay, yes, no, we can't make this happen. It wouldn't be safe for our con goers, our volunteers, our sponsors." But at least, especially as a new president, I had that contact with more experienced people on the outside.
No, I agree with Jay and everybody that's just spoke. Like, being part of this community has done so much for me personally, but also it's opened up for a lot of friendship, like Emmanuel said, so that you can call on people. And I don't think that will ever die. You know, COVID can't kill that.
No.
Awesome.
they would have to try to kill our passion for the hobby that we love, right? And that's not going anywhere. So.
No, exactly. The only thing that might kill it on this end is, and this is bringing up, we were talking about restrictions and stuff like that, how much restrictions are now placed on a show to make it doable. And I could see, I could get a little burnt out trying to plan a show where 80% of its restrictions, you know, that might burn me out a bit. But you're right, Emmanuel. I don't think it would ever kill anything.
In fact, if anything, I think something along those lines would actually increase the interrelationships between a lot of the smaller cons, because if Sudbury Graphicon comes up with a solid plan and an implementation for it, well, I'm not going to hoard that to myself. I'm going to share that out with every small convention possible.
That's beautiful.
And if that means my taking a weekend off work and going for a ride, then so be it.
I help out and participate as well at Anime North, and they have some other side events. There was an event that they did, a con just for con organizers on that side of in Toronto and other. And I remember this one panel that I went to go speak on. It was how to run a show. How do you start up a show in your town, your school, your whatever? And that 2-hour panel from the people there who had never organized anything, I think 2, maybe 3 cons that are still running came out of that panel, right? And they started off their own shows after getting to talk and having all these people, you know, the people from Anime North, me from Fourth City, and a couple other organizers from other shows, right? And they still, like, for the first 2 or 3 years, it was like, hey, what's going on? What are you doing? What do you think of this? Right? And it's fantastic seeing the organizers, you know, basically multiply by being friends and asking each other, how do you do it and how can I do it where I am? So
Nice. Well, then definitely let's get together in about 3 months. We'll have another big chat and then see where we stand on this.
Cool.
Sounds
Awesome.
good.
sounds
like a plan.
fantastic.
Everybody else out there, stay tuned. We are coming back eventually when we can, hopefully sooner than later. But thanks everybody for watching, and we will talk to everybody out there soon.
Thanks, guys.